I'm Carmine Gallo with acclaimed neuroscientist Adam Gazzaley, who is a professor of neurology and psychiatry at UCSF, also runs the Neuroscape lab at the university. He is the author of a fantastic book that is permanently on my bookshelf and one that is more relevant today than ever. It's called The Distracted Mind. Adam, thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time.
Thanks for having me here.
We are having this conversation face to face over a virtual platform. Or are we? To the ancient brain, is what we are doing registering as a natural face-to-face conversation?
Well, I think that there's a reason that as shelter in place happened, we all navigated very rapidly to video calls as opposed to phone calls. It's because of this need to see each other and to pick up subtle cues like body language and facial expressions that may give information that's just not being transmitted by voice. So yes, I would say in some ways, this is much closer than just a pure audio call to what our ancient brains register as, our social interaction. There are, however, lots of differences about it too, which I think we're feeling right now. There is what we call in the business a latency, a lag that exists because the timing is not perfect. And it creates a little bit of an unnatural situation, even if it's very subtle, even if you're not aware of it. These lags in communication sort of throw off how our brain registers events as occurring. And because of that, sometimes we need to maybe emphasize things a little bit more or push our attention a little further. And that, I would say, causes a fatigue. And a lot of people talk about it. I noticed it. We just talked a little bit with each other, this Zoom fatigue, people will call it. My assistant calls it being a Zoom bee. She's like, I don't want to turn you into a Zoom bee. So, there is, it is closer, but it does have a lot of differences. We could continue to talk about them that I think is really challenging to people, and people are starting to recognize that.
Has our high-tech world, digital devices, addiction to digital screens, and I think it's fair to call it an addiction, has all of this digital noise interfered, or is there any proof that it has interfered, Adam, with our ability to have effective interpersonal conversations?
There is data pre this period, this very unusual period of digital communication that we're in right now, although research is being done currently, showing that our digital worlds creates a level of interference with our activities, no matter what they are. It may be writing an article, or your schoolwork, or going to sleep, or your personal interactions with a loved one that needs a higher degree of attention when your phone goes off. Even the very presence of a phone that is in sight, maybe even not even your phone, actually increases the interference in communication and empathy and connection between people. So it is documented that this digital ecosystem we've created around us to help us communicate and connect and entertain ourselves does have a cost in terms of how we interact with the world around us.
I find that to be a fascinating part of your book and your research as well. So you're saying, Adam, the presence of my phone on this desk, it's on silent mode. The mere presence is interfering with my ability to concentrate on our conversation?
Yeah, so that was some work that I have done, or my co-author, but we reported in the book because it is so fascinating as you're reacting to. Our brains pick up very subtle signals around us all the time for things that have great valence, importance to us, salience as well. And the phone is our gateway, right? It's everything that's coming in, your emails there, your texts, your social media. And so it's pretty salient. And yes, the presence of it will trigger events in your mind that may be subconscious, but are distracting you from focusing, giving all your attention to, what's in front of you, to what's relevant to you right at the moment.
Please explain for everyone optimal foraging theory. I think this is fascinating. And it's very similar to things that I've studied or I've written about in the area of persuasion and communication. But we'll get to that. Optimal foraging theory. Please explain.
Sure. So as I was writing the book, I didn't want to just give out self-help techniques because they just intuitively made sense to me. I wanted to base it on some sort of model that gave it at least a rationale that could be proved or disproved, even though it's largely hypotheses now. And the idea behind optimal foraging theory, and there are many different types, is that mathematically, the behaviors of animals and how they forage for food, whether it's a predator-prey relationship or what's known as the marginal value theorem, which defines how animals that forage for foods in patchy environments, how they make decisions to stay in a patch or leave a patch. And these models can be quite accurate both in the field, in the wild, in animals that are in captivity. And so the marginal value theorem I thought was quite relevant to how we forage for information. So what it would describe is a picture of a squirrel in a tree eating those nuts. At some point, the squirrel is going to leave the tree and go to another one. And that decision is a balance between the availability of nuts in the tree. As they get less and less, there's a diminishing return of staying there. But it's also balanced by how long it takes the squirrel to get to the next tree. If the next tree is right there, full of nuts, they will leave quicker. If the next tree is further away, they will stay longer. And so it's sort of a cost-benefit ratio of staying versus leaving. And I would propose that we forage for information in patchy environments. So it might be a website, or it might be your phone, or a social media forum. And that at some point, if the next information source is so close, which it is now with multiple browsers and tabs and having multiple screens, having your phone in your pocket, if the information is so close, if that next tree is right there, we're like a squirrel that has diminishing value of remaining in a patch because we're getting bored, which is what really happens. And then the next patch is right there, and so we keep switching. And so with that model, you get to sort of think about, okay, what would I do to make myself less likely to jump to the next tree and spend more time fully eating the nuts in the tree that I'm in?
That theory and that explanation in and of itself, I think, is going to provide so much benefit for people. I know it did for me, because as I've told you, I've diagnosed ADHD. So my whole life has been trying to learn focusing strategies. And what I didn't realize until I've started reading your work is that this whole idea of constantly seeking new stimulus, new inputs, and information, when I go on YouTube just to find one particular video that is relevant to my project at hand, then I'm getting recommended a whole bunch of other videos. So, Adam, I know we're no different than the squirrel. I'm jumping to the other tree. I'm forward. Then I see an alert from one of my news feeds. I have to forage on that. Pretty soon, I haven't even written a word, a sentence or two. So this, I hate to always compare ourselves to the mammal, but that's what we are. And our species isn't that much different in terms of this foraging behavior. And now these social media and algorithms and the social media companies have kind of figured it out. So we have to regain control, Adam.
That's the message. Regain control. First, be aware of the loss of control, and then figure out how to regain it. I agree.
So that brings us to some of the benefits. Let's talk about that, because part 3 of your book just has a lot of wonderful, very practical steps that we can take to regain control and to improve our performance. And one of them, I think one of the first ones, is just being aware. Is that not the case? Just being aware that this is happening.
Yeah, I always like to start with awareness. Awareness is a tricky thing because a lot of people in the field who have generated all sorts of self-help advice accurately point out that awareness is not enough, right? You could be aware that smoking is bad for you, could be aware that eating excessively and unhealthy foods is not good for you. And it doesn't mean you're going to change your behavior. So it's fair to say that awareness is not enough. But I think awareness is an important part of behavioral change. I think having the understanding, the insight is critical first step. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, is to just show through many examples, through both neuroscience and real world challenges. Larry Rosen, my co-author, is a field psychologist. So he's studying how actual behavior in the real world is impacted by technology. I think it's important to become more introspective, as you said, to notice that you are moving rapidly between all these sources, that you're being pulled and tugged, probably by design, and that you are not in control over where you're maintaining your attention. So step one is to be aware that our brains, as wonderful as they are, have very, very clear limitations that have been described by many neuroscientists, and to be aware of those limitations so that you can be more thoughtful in how you manage your technology.
In the area of persuasion research, I've had to evaluate and look at a lot of studies on this idea of limited cognition, our limited ability to store information in working memory
Mhm.
or short-term memory. Can you explain that, please? Like, what do we mean by a limitation in terms of our cognitive ability? Even though, as you say, it's the most our brain is one of the most magnificent things in the world, and yet it's
Mhm.
very limited in
Mhm.
our cognitive ability, especially in short term. What does that mean, and how does
Mhm.
that apply to our digital world?
Yeah, so cognitive control, which is a term that I use a lot, especially in the book, which is how we direct our attention based on our goals, not just based on things in the environment that are pulling on it, but you have a goal. We want to have this conversation. We want to be present for it. What are the limitations in cognitive control that prevent us from doing that? One of them is our ability to take in all the information around us. We're selectively sampling the world. There's way more information, even present between us right now, probably in your periphery, that if you took in, you would be completely overloaded. So attention is a selective process. The other thing is that when you move, when you switch your attention, and maybe you're switching, we're constantly switching attention right now, what you have to do is maintain the information that was relevant in your mind for that brief period of time. That's what we call working memory. Working memory is not long-term memory. It doesn't mean that you're going to remember it tomorrow, but it's that cache, it's that online memory, to use computer terms, that allows you to bridge perceptual events. So if you're having a conversation with someone and you think of something to say, but another person is saying something, you're holding that information in mind. And you may actively rehearse it, you may not, but it's being held sort of in reserve. That is very limited, that working memory. We know it very well when you try to like hold a phone number in mind. If the phone number is too many digits, if you also have the area code and a country code, you lose it. And so we have those limitations there, both in our ability to take in information. It has to be selective. We have limitations on how many tasks we can do it at one time. They're constantly pulling away from each other. And we have limitations on working memory, how much we can hold in mind at one time. And so once you appreciate that, you realize how important it is to really have singular focus and singular attention if you want to do something with really high quality.
That's one of the reasons why when I work with CEOs or executives on presentations or communication skills, I try to get them to stick to three main points, three or four at the most, three main messages to get across. Because from what I've learned, and I think it's in your book as well, we are limited in how much information we can store at any one time. Is that correct?
Mhm. That's correct. We are, the limitations happen across all the time scales, both in the long term and certainly immediately how much you could manage.
What is this rule of thirds or rule of three? Why is that so critical to understand?
Um, you know, there's 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 different theories around it, and largely it comes down to keeping the numbers small so that it's manageable, and then chunking things so that they could be combined together and not treated as separate entities. So you even think of like remembering a phone number, you do it like in a third, a fourth, and so you just like combine those so that they're a unit. It's called clumping, and it allows you to actually. It's sort of like a hack to take in more information in some ways.
Well, that's why I think that this is part of the fix or some of the solutions that we should talk about. The Zoom meetings that I see, and whether people are using Zoom or Microsoft Teams or any other virtual platform, WebEx and the others, in my opinion, they're too long, far too long. I think a 3-hour Zoom meeting is absurd.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
I agree with you
there's
on that.
way too much information being delivered. So for leaders, for business professionals, what are some of the other solutions that we should be thinking about, especially in this kind of new normal of
Mhm.
digital conversation?
Yeah, there's a lot of lessons that, and sort of tips that I gave at the end of the book. And a lot of it is based really on that model that we talked about, the optimal foraging model,
Yep.
and also my
I
own
have about
experience.
20 tips that you give at the end of the book. So
I love it.
I'm curious
Thank
about
you.
which should we highlight?
Yeah, the ones I want to highlight now are the ones that I think are most relevant to this very unusual form of communication that we're doing right now, the video call. I think that you're right that very long video calls don't work well. And the main reason why is that yet another aspect of awareness I would like people to appreciate is that our cognitive abilities fatigue. We all know very well how our muscles fatigue. It's like the main message, like you can only work out so long, you feel it. Athletes have really embraced the fact that fatigue is part of training. You have to train and then you have to rest so that you're more capable of re-engaging. Somehow with cognition, we started thinking that fatigue was like a weakness, that if you couldn't work 8 hours without stopping, somehow you were inferior and not really, a mental athlete. And that is just ridiculous. Our brains fatigue just like our muscles do. And it's important to restore so that you can re-engage at a high level. And a very long Zoom call doesn't give you that break. I think it's more exhausting than normal interaction in the world for some of the reasons we said. There's a lot of distractions going around you, right? So we both have worlds that exist outside of this square, this rectangle that everyone else is seeing. And those distractions are something that needs to be actively resisted. So resisting distraction is an active process. It's not a passive process. And so if you have kids running behind you or other things going on your periphery, your brain is actively suppressing that to maintain attention. So it is more exhausting than being in a conference room where those distractions are limited. So I would say, in terms of advice, the first thing to do is try to create an environment around you that has minimal distraction. Having, this is going to be as possible as it is, right? Everyone's in their homes. We get it. It's really difficult. You have your families there. My wife is, on a Zoom call right across the room. It's just not a perfect environment. It's not like necessarily an office where you can make everything ideal. And so that's why it's helpful to have shorter calls so you can get that break and walk away from your computer, rest your eyes from looking at a 2D screen. But the first thing I'd do is say, minimize your workspace. Try as best you can to keep it not cluttered, not devices that are not needed right in front of you. If possible, like how I try to change the lighting so that, you can't see the entire room at one time, and allowing you to have a more simple palette, a simpler focus for you to, create and have a conversation. The other advice would be to take breaks. There is a fatigue that occurs that we talked about, and the really only way to restore from fatigue is to rest. And so taking a break is critical. Now, I know you'll probably remember this from my book, is that, I feel very strongly that all breaks are not created equally. So if you take a break from a video conference call, whatever platform you're on, and your break is to then go on social media
Yes.
and do email and text, you should really not consider that a break, right? Because you're
It is
still
not a break.
engaging. It's not a break. You're
Yeah.
taking those top-down processes. So you think you're taking a break, but basically you never take a break.
Mm.
And you'll have a sort of increasing burden over the course of the day if you don't ever take that break. So breaks that I think are important are quiet, closing of your eyes, allowing your mind to just relax. Looking at nature has a lot of data showing that it has benefits. If you could get out in nature, that would be great. Even just looking at trees, even pictures of nature has shown some benefits. Physical exercise, doing some push-ups or some squats could really help as well. But really just getting off the digital devices, even having a conversation is better with a person in real life than just continuously engaging in digital.
Adam, it's funny that you bring that up. I've noticed that during the COVID quarantine, during the shutdowns, I have been exercising at times that normally would not be exercising. 10 a.m., 11 a.m.,
Mhm,
maybe 1
mhm.
o'clock
Me
the
too.
latest. I come back more refreshed and increased performance than ever. That's going to be
Yeah,
my new
I,
rule too, if I can, when I can, because if you wait till the end of the day after you have, 8 hours of Zoom fatigue, you're really tired.
I have the same experience. Part of it is that I used to go to a gym, and now my gym is in my home. I have weights here, and I have a bike. So I love that mini exercise. It's definitely, I am a big fan of that. It is a great way to just refresh yourself, restore your mind, get back into it. Even 15 minutes of exercise would be a really good break throughout the day. So I agree with you. I'm actually doing that one a lot myself.
You mentioned boredom. How do I decrease boredom while I'm working on a particular assignment or watching Zoom meetings?
Yeah, boredom is a really interesting one. There are two phenomena that occur, well, let's say three phenomena that occur over time as you engage in a singular activity, right? So we have this challenge here. I'm telling you to engage in a singular source of focus because you will do it more effectively. But it's not easy to do. And because as time goes on, there's the cognitive fatigue we talked about.
Mhm.
There's also many people get an increase in anxiety that they're not doing something else, that they're not checking in on on a post that they put on social media, or that they haven't checked in with their office, even though they're doing other work. So there's the anxiety accumulation, and then there is the third one, which is what you mentioned, which is boredom. And we've become very we being humans in general, it seems, although there are exceptions, of course, become very intolerant to boredom. And it's really a habit, I would say, that if you don't allow yourself to be bored, it becomes really uncomfortable. For example, you're online at the grocery store and there's just two people in front of you. It's not really very long to wait. You could just think about things and be creative, maybe just look around you, but it feels boring to stand there for a lot of people. And so you go into your phone and start going through the same, spiral that you do all the time. But I think that in terms of dealing with boredom, a lot of it is just practice and realizing that boredom's not going to kill you. It's okay. It's like, a little bit of hunger is okay too. It's okay to feel a little bit uncomfortable and just sit with it for a while and get okay with being a little bit bored. And with time, once you get used to it, you realize that there's some pleasure in that quiet period, in that sort of lack of extreme reward that we get when we're constantly switching. And so, like other things that take practice, like meditation, for example, that with some tolerance to boredom, it actually becomes something that could be quite enjoyable to allow yourself to not be constantly rewarded.
I think that's fascinating. And in all of my years of interviewing famous entrepreneurs or successful CEOs, it's interesting that the most creative ideas happen in those times of boredom
Mm,
or travel
exactly.
when they have a different way of looking at the world. But nobody ever says they came up with the next great idea while flipping through their social media feed.
You're right. It's those times that you stop taking in information, and we're information-seeking creatures, right? There's a reason why we consume information, like other animals consume food. To go back to our early conversation, and so if you're constantly streaming in, like from a fire hose, information, you don't really have that space to allow elements that might be very disparate to become connected, which is really what creativity is. And so I think it is critical for creativity to slow down that stream of information and allow some of that quiet space to occur.
Adam, finally, and we can repeat some of the information that we've already talked about. I do write for leaders, not just business professionals, but for people who are leading companies, leading those Zoom meetings. Uh,
Mhm.
Based on everything we've said, what are some things that you suggest that leaders keep in mind as
Yeah.
they work with remote teams?
Yeah, I could tell you some of, I have several companies and my research center, so I have a lot of leadership needs, demands myself.
Right.
I try
What is the
not,
neuroscientist doing himself? That's what I wanted.
yeah, I really try not to schedule Zoom meetings for more than an hour. I feel like there is a diminishing return. Look, there are times, it's crunch time, there's a lot to cover where we'll have more than an hour. And if we do, we put a break in there. So like our center meetings sometimes are 2 hours. They're like the one big showcase of the week where we all get together. There could be, like 45 of us on a Zoom. We'll take a break in the middle. Let's take 10. Everyone, clear your mind, take a walk, get something to drink, do your exercise, whatever you need to do, and then we'll reconvene. I
Oh,
think that's
Adam,
really,
hold. I love that.
yeah,
So
sure.
you actually scheduled like a 10-minute break within the
Oh
Zoom
yeah.
meeting. You don't end the Zoom meeting. You just take a
No, we
break.
don't end the Zoom meeting. We just take a break and we say
10
we're
minutes
setting a
after
timer.
what amount of time, Adam?
Well, we'll have like let's say 50 minutes, then we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll start the second hour.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. And, it's sort of fun. Everyone like slowly starts reconvening. Most people turn their cameras off. We tell them, go ahead, this is your own time. I think that's really valuable. Um, and then the other thing, it's funny being the leader of an organization. There's this desire for productivity, right? That's like critical for success. And I think there was a time where everyone was saying multitask, try to do 6 things at once. And now hopefully I've helped to contribute to the realization, to the knowledge that we don't multitask very well. Our brains don't do it very well. And you're likely to have less ultimate productivity and less quality if you focus on many things at once versus one thing at a time. And I think another awareness that we're coming to now, hopefully as a global community, is that it's not necessary to be connected all the time, right? It's okay to say, it's 5 p.m. I'm shutting down email now. I'm going to be with my family. If there's an emergency, text me, call me, my phone, it's there, but I'm not going to check email for 24 hours a day. I've become very aware of my own sort of email treadmill that I'm constantly on. And I think as a leader, it's helpful to tell your team that you don't expect that of them, that it's okay for them to disconnect. It's a very stressful time for so many reasons. And I think that is a supportive act to do for your team. And I don't think in the end it's going to lead to less productivity. I think it's going to lead to better satisfaction and even better productivity when people get to really step away and then come back in fresh again.
As you were saying that, I grew frustrated and I was shaking my head because I am getting frustrated with what I hear from business professionals at a lot of large companies that we all know with the leadership. The leadership is not doing what we're suggesting. In fact, it's just the opposite, Adam, that they are booking Zoom meetings whenever there is an extra 10 minutes. So now a lot of folks I know are on Zoom or virtual meetings from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. And then they're expected to be responsive 24/7 to email from their
Yeah.
leaders. No, you're going to get a
Yeah.
lot more from your team if you give them those breaks, give them those cognitive breaks that they absolutely need. That's why they need to understand this stuff.
Yeah, I think that is really critical. And I think it's more important now than ever. Stress and its association with depression, with anxiety, with sleep problems is very well documented, with attention problems. And we are on a very, very high stress, we're in a very high stress environment right now. And the data is convincing. People are suffering. And paying attention to the mental well-being of your teams is a big part of your job as a leader. I really believe that. And the productivity will be there. And you could adjust, but I think it is really important to wrap your head around the fact that people are living really stressful lives right now, and the best that you can help them and not make them feel guilty about taking time away is going to benefit everyone in the end.
The Distracted Mind, more relevant than ever. Fantastic book. Thank you so much for writing that. And do you have a blog, or where can people find your current content? Because you're always coming up with new information from the lab.
Yeah, Gazzaley.com. I'm redoing that website right now. It's like really an aggregate of all the things I'm working on from our company, Achille, where we have the first FDA approved video game. So very interesting sort of other flip on technology as a therapeutic, not just a distractor, and our work from the lab and other articles that I've been writing. So that would be a good place to visit.
I love all your work. Adam, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was great talking with you.